Hey Earl, happy Friday from the Stubtail Ranch up Rock Creek. How you doing?
I'm doing great, and greetings from Northwest Houston.
All right, you're feeling all right? Everybody's healthy around you?
Everybody's healthy. I've definitely been building pandemic Ritas and drinking them. Bought a lot more Corona beer, so I'm in good shape here.
That's great. Well, it's great to see you. I really was in preparation for this, was trying to think about the first time we met, and I couldn't bring it back to the origin point. And I was thinking some of the highlights of our interactions over the 6 years. One of them is, when I think of Earl Dodd, I think of digital twin,
Ah,
because during the global water exchange it was the biggest idea that we had come up with, right? a, a,
yes.
a real-time analytical digital twin of the earth running simulations for climate and resources, and would have been great if we could have had that to run a pandemic simulation at that point. um,
It would have helped. I believe it would have helped.
well, yeah, well, here we are. And I know you're a big thinker around technology and systems thinking, and I'd really like if you wouldn't mind letting our viewers know, how you got to where you are today and what you're working on.
Fantastic. Again, Matt, thanks for this opportunity. And I started with very humble origins. I was born and raised in Montana and lived out on a farm and a ranch outside of Twin Bridges. Most people don't know where that is, but I assume all Montanans do. And so I had a really good upbringing for work ethics and things like that. Went to school at Montana Tech. I'll always call it Montana Tech. And got a couple degrees in mining engineering and started working with extreme scale supercomputings in the oil patch, uh, doing mining optimization, and then moving over into petroleum work and geophysics, seismic. And then that just kind of exploded. I got addicted to high performance computing, supercomputers, went to work for Cray and for many, many years, and IBM and others, and have always been in the extreme scale, high end computing space. Recently, I've been asked to stand up a business practice at Worldwide Technologies. It's a very large, privately owned company, global company, to bring high performance computing across the board to federal governments, different state and local governments, to commercial entities. So I'm just a math and science guy, and do things at extreme scale and extreme speed. So, and in fact, this time, what's going on now with this unprecedented set of activities around the pandemic is actually has made it very busy for me. I'm busier than ever talking to agencies, DoD mainly, and other groups in the commercial world, industrial sectors, from car companies to oil companies, digital media companies, of how to drive better performance with the assets they have, with people not necessarily being in the office.
Right. And the scale of and the speed of transition from traditional workplaces to now the whole world on remote work, right? Essential services only, and the rest of us told, here in Montana just last night, shelter in place. What does that mean? I know what it's meant for the Montana Chamber of Commerce. We're doing a lot more of these things, right? We're talking to our members
Exactly.
via Zoom constantly. We're getting, all circuits busy, or here in Western Montana. Maybe you could
I
talk.
can help you with that, by the way, Matt.
There's a
So,
lot of people that need it in Montana right now. How do you help, Earl? How are you going to help us?
well, here's the thing that most people don't realize, circuit busy, or I can't call, or things like that. Sorry about that.
Eh,
First rule of etiquette: turn off your cell phone. I forgot to do it. Oh my.
I better do mine too.
Yeah. So what most people don't realize is the internet, I'll just use that as an amorphous term, is very resilient. And it's up, it's running, it's not dead in places or other areas. There are certain forms of technology or that last mile problem where you may have that circuit is busy, or you can't make that phone call, you get the busy signal, etc. Or you may get a little bit of pixelation through video cameras and stuff, but that's generally the last mile issue, that last little piece. And that's the thing that I would love to see come out of this whole activity around the pandemic, and the response to that is improved, not only Montana, but North America's communications infrastructure. It just has to be a natural outcome for this.
And is that just you know, capex investment? Is that all it really takes, or are there other things that should be considered?
Well, there's certainly capex, opex involved. There's a lot of technology. We got, through the 2000s and the fiber overbuild and everything else, and we got parts of that infrastructure in. We tried through the Obama administration when I did I was on the transition team for that. We were going to do more of the rural broadband issue and move that out. That stagnated in that administration. It never happened to its fullest extent. And I do believe that Department of Commerce, especially, who was helping drive that capability through other loans like Federal Communications, et cetera, I think they'll come back together and they'll relook at this, especially now with the new tech that's coming on, 5G.
Yep.
And gosh, people are sometimes just getting 4G or 4 LTE there. 5G is here. 5G is going to be a significant game changer.
Earl, can you talk a little bit about the differences and the improvements from 4G to 5G in layman's terms? What's going to change for the average business owner or me, right? What's going to change?
Yeah, the key thing is not everything is going to go to just 5G or cellular-based technology. You will never get rid of the cable or the Wi-Fi, okay, or the fiber optic cable or the Wi-Fi. You're going to start seeing copper go away, kind of like the old telephone systems, and you'll get fiber to the curb, fiber to the premise here almost all the time after this. So the big difference is it's on a different wavelength, and that wavelength has capability at that higher frequency to drive more data bidirectionally in and out of the device. So, just multiply it by a few hundred times, maybe 1,000 times, and that's your speed. And depending on where you're at and everything. So what it's going to do, and the other thing it does is I don't have to it doesn't use the same big tall cell phone towers. It uses kind of like a little Pringles can as the antenna. They're distributed a little bit differently, and then you'll start getting what's called 5G backhaul, which means they'll aggregate into a big bandwidth pipe going somewhere else. And so you'll start seeing a better driven, more municipality driven communication network with higher speed, higher performance that then keeps up with the Wi-Fi, the standard Wi-Fi or the standard direct connect through fiber or copper. So it'll balance, things will start balancing out. And what does that do to business? What does that do to emergency management? I mean, it just gives you a whole bunch of new opportunities. It's a new slate out there right now. Yes, there's the standard stuff you can do with streaming Netflix, but by going to 5G and especially Wi-Fi 6, too bad they're not in sync with the same numbering scheme, but when you go to these two different technologies, you start opening up the possibility of, well, what if I had the data for this and this and this? How can I help a business, somebody in surgery, etc.?
Okay, so it's all about the data, right? And you just kind of touched on that. And this is a place I'd like to take our conversation. And I know you're I read your paper that you sent, previously about the aggregation of data, using that data to go out and using that data to find the correct data or the useful data, right?
Yeah. So, so Matt, in my world, I work on systems that have, let's say, few 100,000 to a few million cores. Just say 100,000 times to a million times bigger than the system that you've got right there doing this webinar. So I live in a world that is big and fast and expensive. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, I can have the most powerful supercomputer in the world, and it's still garbage in, it's still garbage out. You've got to have sovereignty of your data. You have to know the veracity of your data. So we're living in this big data era, drowning in data, but is it the right data? Is it the necessary data? Is this data have truth to it? Can it be verifiable? Do I even need it?
Sure.
And so we're going to be moving from what I call the old world, which is not very old, it's like 10 years old, the data warehousing world, into now they're called data lakes.
Yeah.
And what I believe we should be moving to is our data fountains, basically giving us the bits and pieces that we actually need over time in real time or near real time. So, real time to a surgeon is, a tenth of a microsecond, if I'm doing remote surgery and things like that, versus maybe real time in my automated meter reading for my electricity consumption at home. Yeah, maybe 5 minutes is good enough.
Sure.
Okay. So whatever that near real time is. But data is king. Data is the new currency. Data is the new oil.
So let's talk about this lull or this reset time, right? Where the kind of the global economy for more or less is shutting down. I know you're super busy, but as far as, Main Street Montana or Main Street America, it's shutting down. Yeah. Would you have any recommendations for the small business or the small medium enterprises of things they could do now where their employees are out, right? A lot of them are laid off, but what should they be doing from a technical perspective to start preparing for the other side of the COVID crisis?
Yes. That is a great question, Matt. And the first thing I tell everybody on my team and other teams that I work with, even when I was at the U.S. Army a couple weeks ago, breathe. Okay, let's get back into a sane mindset and not into a panic. Start actually using our prefrontal cortex,
right?
and not the amygdala, and have the fight or flight syndrome. Okay. So, once we kind of get into our Zen mode, into our happy place, there are several things we need. The first thing I always tell people is let's get an assessment. Let's kind of step back, see what's working, look left and right, see what's not working, and take an inventory of assets. Most people don't understand all their assets. Sure, I guarantee everybody on this call or this video would know that people are their primary and best asset, right? They're number one. But there's data assets out there. There's other forms of critical infrastructure that they might need, a microscope or a testing system, things like that. So first thing to do is get aware of what you have. Many times we've been running 78 miles an hour, going every which way there is, and we kind of been additively putting things in and taking things out, subtractive, and then we really don't know what we have. So first thing to do is step back, take a look, do the 100,000 foot level, and just assess what there is. Then once you have that assessment, then you can then you can start basically using an abatement process or let's see, I can prune here. I can do some other things. I find a gap. You do the classic gap analysis and say, geez, now if I have this and I want to get to from A to C, but I'm missing B, how do I get B? So start looking at the gap analysis, fill in the blanks, so to speak. That's a great time right now when we're all in this lockdown mode. Use the video technology, the audio technology, and just have these chats. Get your team or teams of people to basically do that assessment, inventory, and abatement. Figure out where those gaps are. Then once you figure out the gaps, then you start putting budget and resources and time to that to basically fill in the gaps.
Right.
Then from there, the thing that's most missing, though, I find when I talk to folks, and it's true across the board. It doesn't matter whether it's in Department of Defense, Department of Energy. I talk to other countries. I used to go all over the world, right? Not right now. Is they don't actually have a scorecard.
Okay.
What's success? What's their KPIs? Key performance indicators. So, going through that assessment and going through the abatement, then you start basically optimizing and start building up this advanced capabilities. You got to know if you hit the target.
Right.
And it's not, again, only maybe 20% of the stuff is financial. There's all the intangible things that are better. This is what the pandemic is going to basically bring out. All the other dendritic, I didn't want to use viral because that was an overloaded term, but dendritic capabilities of how you're connected to all these other different pieces, places, and processes. And that's going to be very important when you start optimizing this together and looking at the overall success. And then the thing that really helps you get above and beyond everybody else is this, to help build this resiliency, to help basically keep ahead of the game, is you do institutionalized learning. You basically learn from the mistakes, test something new, throw it on the wall, see if it sticks. If it sticks, great. If it doesn't, try something else. Business has been, I see this in cultures, a lot of cultures. It's not quite so bad in the United States, but you go over to certain other countries, there are cultures where failing is like the worst thing you could do. If you fail, you're bad. It's a shameful thing. If we don't fail, we're not pushing the envelope hard enough. Now, there's difference between catastrophic failure by ignorance, and failure by planning, or failure by instituting something and trying it and fail. I mean, look at our best buddy, Edison, 10,000 times before he finally figures it out.
Right.
So we have this mindset right now that failure is bad. And I think part of resiliency, part of what you're talking about, Matt, is a psychological change. It's a brain change to say, okay, I can adapt, I can change, I can fail or move on.
Yeah.
And that's my major message. This is what literally I was, like I said, I was at the Army, and it wasn't necessarily talking about this supercomputer running this thing to do wargaming over here. It was talking about resiliency of systems and people of the systems, working with the systems.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna take us in. You mentioned Edison, right? So I'm gonna take us into the Renaissance piece of this conversation. You have a crystal ball there, right? You can fast forward into the future. What do you think? What comes out of this that changes humanity? Right? We've talked a lot about the business and the technology and the infrastructure. What do you think we do as a people here, in addition to understanding how dependent we are upon the rest of the world, right? The global supply chains and those things. Um, but just hypothesize for me.
Oh, I can hypothesize, man. My whole world is living in that crystal ball. We call it Horizon 2
Okay.
time frame. That's basically, in technology world, what's going to happen in 2 to 8, maybe 10 years. And I live in that 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 year time frame. So I never deal with reality half the time. So uh, as with anything, uh, whether catastrophic like the pandemic, COVID-19, there are certainly some very bad and negative aspects of that, the death rates and mortalities and everything. But there are actually a silver lining in a gray cloud here, huge silver lining in a gray cloud here. And we kind of talked about some of the stuff. First off, it demonstrated the resiliency of the internet. And what that means is distributed systems survive. Okay, they can basically pick up the load and handle it. Yeah, we may have that last mile problem. So what does that mean? We need to start looking at improving our global supply chain, our workforces, et cetera, to more of a distributed or municipal driven capabilities. We look at, we've talked about this, Matt, from the water perspective. We've talked about this from the electricity generation perspective. Jeremy Rifkin's book, The Fourth Industrial Revolution, is obviously in play here right now. So when I look at the crystal ball, I see, when going through all my assessments and everything else, I see the communication infrastructure here improving and changing, but becoming more distributed. Technically, the cellular system is already distributed, but you're going to see better regional branching and capability. The same way that you're going to see healthcare. This is going to basically change the way we're going to distribute and manage and process people through the healthcare system. That has to have an effect. We'll certainly see better scenario planning activities go on. That's why people are buying big systems from me, is to go in and, how much vaccine do I need? Where do I put the masks? Where do I, put the National Guard if I have to deploy them, and things like that. So scheduling, the global supply chain is a big issue. So I'm already seeing fabrication facilities being moved back to the Western countries. Not everything being in China, Taiwan, Indonesia, and elsewhere. So there is this move to looking at what is the total cost, the true total cost and impact of my global supply chain if one piece, which is highly for example, put in China. I'm building chips or computer chips, or not potato chips. I don't deal with potato chips. I only deal with computer chips and disk drives and things like that. Yeah. So if where can I supply these? For example, Guadalajara, Mexico, and other places, Monterrey, Mexico, and is basically building up their capability to do IT manufacturing. So we have a North America accessible, more regionalized supply chain. So I see this all happening, and even in Montana. I mean, maybe east to the west, you're going to start seeing more of these hub and spoke kind of moving away from hub and spoke to a mesh kind of system. Because hub and spoke doesn't work. Ask the airlines how the hub and spoke system's working right now.
There's an industry. You said you're not traveling anymore, right? It's all going to be. So let's think about the way that we worked before this, even 2 months ago, and the way we're working now. If let's say I'm a high school student or I'm a college student, and I want to prepare for this new world, right? What recommendations would you make to a high school kid or or a college student that are trying to make sense of it and figure it out?
Yeah. Wow. Great question. Here's when I went to high school, Matt, I think we still had slate and chalk and stuff like that, right?
Right? Right?
So I remember cleaning the erasers half the time with my face. That was a different issue. That we'll talk about that later. Uh, anyway, the, part of the new generation are already just immersed in this kind of digital world, right? They're used to the YouTubes and everything else. What I find challenging for the young generation, some of those folks report to me, I manage them, etc., is their attention span is really short. And when we're doing some really complex problems and learning, and if we're doing truly online learning, that learning is going to become more and more interactive, and that requires a longer attention span to basically interact and do critical thinking.
Huh.
And I see that there's an opportunity for education, especially remote and rural education, to help build that attention span and critical thinking skills. Because when you're in class, especially graduate programs, you're in there, you're intense, you're doing the labs, you're doing all this other stuff, and so you can focus on that. But when you're quote homeschooled now, you have to basically focus for a longer period of time on a set of screens, and so that requires that the instructional education be done well, but it also requires true interactivity, and it'll require us, the ones that are taking the class or viewing this, to improve our attention span and actually being able to ask questions and get those questions answered. The problem I have with the Khan's Academies of the world and Udemy and others is it's unidirectional. Most often it's unidirectional. And we learn, contrary to popular belief, Socrates got it right, the Socratic method. That works pretty darn good.
So, Earl, I'm going to be respectful of your time here, and I'm going to ask you to help us wrap this up with a positive message, if you can, to those business leaders that will hopefully be watching this. Can you leave us with some optimism and some positivity of the other side of this?
Yeah. Again, thanks for this opportunity. First off, I think we're all in this boat together. I believe that we've been given absolutely, I think, Matt, you called it the reset button. And this has allowed us to go back and really look at our core values within the company and what we actually deliver as a product or service. And I am absolutely convinced, without a doubt, that we're going to come out of this pandemic stronger, better, faster, and more competitive from a local perspective, to state perspective, to a national perspective. We are going to basically lead this planet in what it takes to be resilient. And when it comes to the next, whatever it is, the next big obstacle, which will come, we don't know what it is, but the American way survives, and God bless America.
I couldn't think of a better way to end it. Thanks, Earl. I really appreciate taking the time. Stay healthy, stay safe. If there's anything I can do remotely, by all means, please let me know.
I got to get back up to the cabin for you. I got to get up to Rock Creek.
Yes, you do. Hey, we're going to close the road down, but I'll give you a special travel permission.
There you go.
Thanks, Earl. Take care.
Yes.
Appreciate it.